When I was growing up, my friends and I always knew exactly where to go to get what we needed. At this friend's house, her mom made the best chocolate chip cookies. But this friend's house, his dad made really good grilled cheese. And at this person's house, their parents let you stay up later than anybody else. And all of my friends knew that they could come to my house when they needed 16 different varieties of origami paper, or 108 different shades, perfectly sharpened colored pencils. Because my mom was an art teacher, and our art cabinet, the supplies really were all over our house. They were perfectly organized, they were kept in pristine condition, for art making could spontaneously happen at any moment in my house. And my friends knew that, and they knew they could come over and we would make art together. This month we're celebrating creativity, and while neither of my parents could cook, they taught me to be creative in some other ways. And there's so many ways that we can be creative in this world. And we're going to talk about that more in this story and in the sermon today. And I want to make sure that you all know that in this house, we want to offer you sweet soul food, the freedom to be who you are and maybe stay up late sometimes, having a good time, and something beyond what can be found just at a friend's house, but that deeper connection which holds us as a community. So it is so good to be together at church with you this morning. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 203.
Have you ever been criticized for something that you have made? Would you raise your hand, actually, if you've been criticized for something that you have made? And would you keep it up, actually, if before the age of 10, you were criticized for something that you made? Before the age of 10. Me too. And what a tragedy. I'm sorry. A longer reading this morning from the Unitarian minister Peggy Clark. My son is in kindergarten, she tells us. Every morning before we leave for school, I check his backpack for the essentials. A sweater, a snack packed neatly in his Star Wars lunchbox, an empty water bottle to be filled up at school, some toy cars in case he gets bored on the bus ride home, and one blue plastic folder, standard issue for every kindergartner. It gets put into the backpack empty each morning, and in the afternoon it returns filled with papers. Sometimes there are flashcards with new sight words or a note from the school about an upcoming assembly, but every day, without exception, there's paper colored with crayons or glitter or something else to give it flair, which means that in class every day, without exception, each 6-year-old has a reason to draw something, to paint something, to cut shapes from colored paper and paste it onto something. And every day that blue folder is filled with treasures of the day's lessons and adventures, pictures of butterflies emerging from a cocoon, of the earth rotating around the sun, or maybe of horses flying in a jungle made of lollipops. If you ask my son what he can draw, he'll say, anything. What do you want? Want to see me riding my bicycle over an ocean? Or Grandma learning ninja moves from her cats? Or how about Daddy playing soccer against a team of tigers in space? He can do it all. And at 6 years old, he's encouraged to do it. It's part of the day's curriculum. They learn math and reading and science, and they play outdoors, and they color and they paint and glue things. Hanging in every cubby is a smock ready on a moment's notice. In kindergarten, everything you need is in one room. There's paint and music and room to dance. There's science experiments and lab equipment and materials to read and write and sing and build. And those things are also available later on in middle school, high school, college, but they're in different rooms, maybe different buildings. And as we get older, we limit who has access to them. The older we get, the more specialized and focused. This room is for painting, that room is for singing, and science experiments are done over there. And with each passing year, we discern generally for ourselves, but sometimes for each other, who belongs in which room. Are you a singer? Can you dance? Can you act? Can you draw? That's your room over there. Or maybe you need to find another building. Our birthright as artists and dreamers is drained away from us. Our birthright as artists and dreamers is drained away from us. Daydreaming is part of the creative process. Peggy tells us she spends a lot of time daydreaming. I imagine beautiful old houses, and I decorate them in my mind. Ceilings, walls, windows, floors, furniture. I imagine textures and colors and scents in each room. The other direction my daydreams take is in imagining the perfect community. It's always attached to a farm where animals are safe, a place where people can work and be cared for, a place where everyone is getting what they need. I create this beloved community in my mind over and over again. Daydreaming is a part of the critical process, creative process, and a key to how we survive a world that can be cold and lonely and frightening. It's how we know where we want to go and how we're going to get there. It's the door into whatever is next. I just love that. It's the door into wherever is next. So I have a small confession to make. Like Peggy Clark's kindergartner, Henry, our son, is often sent home from daycare with works of creativity. The latest involved gluing sticks to paper, which I think the teachers probably did, and then streaks of pink paint that Henry haphazardly applied in an abstract nod to cherry blossoms. I love that they make art in daycare. But my confession is this: we do not have a special file where we keep these pieces or a patch of wall on which to display them. Magnets don't stick to our refrigerator, and so these early expressions of our son's creative spark find themselves tossed around in the back seat of the car until eventually they wind up in the recycling bin. A photograph, thanks. I'll start doing that, Michael. Brilliant. But today, we're not talking about the kind of creativity that ends up with finished products that become precious and are saved forever, although with photographs on our digital phones, it's quite easy, isn't it? The kind of creativity that I want to talk about is not the kind that turns into art with a capital A. It's more like kindergarten creativity, the kind of creativity that just begs to be freed from the confines of our thoughts and skin, the kind of creativity that is more an impulse than a talent. It's fed by precious moments of daydream. And as it is pulled out from us into the world in colors, in rhythm, in jokes, in brushstrokes and love notes, it has no great goal or ambition. You're probably aware there are countless guides, books out there for becoming more creative. They often have advice that involves doing things like getting up early, making art every day, creating rituals and sticking to them. Sue shared such a list with me. It was titled 97 Best Creativity Tips Ever. It starts out, make routine and regularity sacred words. And all of that it really is good advice, and it's fine and can sometimes be helpful to grow and deepen in our creativity. Can certainly help to turn our creativity into art. But But it was number 18 out of 97 that landed for me. Wildness is part of the process. Say, I am one wild creature. Shout it out if you dare. I am one, that is the kind of creativity I am one wild creature. That's the kind of creativity we're talking about today. And we do give this creative impulse meaning and purpose. It does inspire and lead to works that have shaped our understanding of ourselves, of humanity, of our world, of our place in the role of the universe. But maybe it was because it was Earth Day yesterday, or because we had that pair of glorious sunny days this week, but I began to imagine, what if our creativity was not so much a testament to brilliance or skill or talents, but more like the photosynthesis of a plant, an essential function of our being. That we take in the sun and the rocks and the rain and the life all around us, and by some mysterious process produce paintings and songs and sculpture and doodles and blogs and an outfit just right for a Sunday in April. And here's the mystery. Where does creativity come from? What is that creative impulse? When we talk about great artists, we often refer to them today as geniuses. And I'm going to talk about where that comes from, the root of that word, in a moment. It had a very different meaning once. But first, just to talk a little bit about what we mean when we use it. When we say someone's a genius, we mean that there's a quality about them that makes them special, extraordinary. Because of their brilliance, their special mind, their unique talents, they are capable of creating in ways that mere mortal nobodies are not, right? But that meaning didn't arise until the 18th century. The development of how we use the word now was part of that Enlightenment mechanistic worldview where the individual was centered before and above the culture and the community. Right? The individual is the genius, arising out of nothing. The culture, the community comes next. And in ancient Rome, where the word comes from, if someone was a particularly inspired artist, they were referred to actually as having a genius, rather than being one. A genius was a spirit who resided in the artist's workshop, providing the artist with creativity, like a muse. A genius, a genie. Okay, that's the root. And it was a spirit of creation, Genesis, generation. So genius was not within the individual, but somehow a relationship with this other spirit, with the world. And so I start to wonder this: what if the I, the ego, the self is not the source of creativity? What if the creative impulse arises out of relationship? Bruce Clear is a retired Unitarian minister who once wrote about wrestling with the theism of a mathematician, Alfred North Whitehead. Whitehead launched this school of thought, process theology. And so a rationalist, humanist-oriented guy, Bruce, wrote this: I remember in my study of Alfred North Whitehead's philosophy, being perplexed by the fact that he talked about God at all. Whitehead offers a fairly complex but complete system. His metaphysics offer to explain why things are the way they are in fully natural, not supernatural ways. Why then did he talk about God? I pored through dozens of books about Whitehead, searching for an answer until I finally found one. It was only a sentence or two, but it suggested a reason. Whitehead needed God, the author said, to explain novelty in the world. Novelty. That something new happens, that something unexpected happens, such as a genetic mutation, for example. The world can go on pretty much as it did today, but somehow something tomorrow will be different. And another philosopher, he finishes, the Unitarian Henry Nielsen Wyman, called it creativity. Novelty or creativity, whatever it is, there is something that allows us to face life with fresh vigor, with excitement, and with meaning. Now, I'm not trying to say we have to call that God or anything, but for me, it's that piece of the Big Bang story that's always left me curious, wanting more. What happened before the Big Bang? What catalyzed that amazing spark of creativity? Where does it come from? John, my drama teacher in high school, said it was the 13th dimension. For one, I think he called it that because high school improv class isn't really one of those places where you get to creatively wrestle with abstract theological frameworks for understanding God, but also because why not the 13th dimension? He talked about it when we were really in the flow, thoroughly warmed up and fully present in the improvisation games. We would sometimes astonish ourselves, I remember, with the scenes we created. Have you ever had a moment of creativity like that? Where you've surprised yourself, astonished yourself by something you've just made? And so we would turn to John, the teacher, and demand an explanation. Where did that come from? Oh, the delight that John got in those moments. This knowing grin sprang across his face. He solemnly shared with us the 13th dimension. Elizabeth Gilbert, known for her book Eat, Pray, Love, recounts this narrative of the creative process. It's about a poet named Ruth Stone, how she described her writing style and inspiration. As Stone was growing up in rural Virginia, she would be out working in the fields, and she would feel and hear a poem coming at her from over the landscape. It was like a thunderous train of air, and it would come barreling down at her over the landscape. And when she felt it coming, because it would shake the earth under her feet, she knew she had only one thing to do at that point. That was to, in her words, run like hell to the house, as she would be chased like the poem. The whole deal was that she had to get a piece of paper fast enough so that when it thundered through her, she could collect it and grab it onto the page. Other times, she wouldn't be fast enough. So she would be running, and she wouldn't get to the house, and the poem would barrel through her, and she would miss it. And it would continue on across the landscape, looking for another poet. And then there were these times, these moments, when she would almost miss it. She's running to the house and is looking for the paper, and the poem passes through her. She grabs a pencil just as it's going through, and she would reach out with her other hand and catch it. And she would catch the poem by its table, and she would pull it backwards into her body as she was transcribing on the page. In those instances, she said, the poem would come up on the page perfect and intact, but backwards, from the last word to the first. Wouldn't you have loved to have known that woman? One wild creature. The world, the universe, the 13th dimension, genies or geniuses or God, human photosynthesis, or the earth in its regenerative cycle of death and rebirth. Wherever that creative impulse comes from, remember this when it is barreling toward you in the form of a poem or simply a fun idea for what to cook for dinner tonight. Say yes to your human birthright and create. For those of you who need the reminder, you are an artist, a creator, and don't let your grade 3 art teacher tell you otherwise. Don't let your grade 3 art teacher or your childhood choir director or anyone else tell you that what you create does not have a place in this world. does not add beauty and value and novelty and wonder to the universe. Because you creating isn't really about what you create, but how life is enriched, minds expanded, hearts opened, eyes transformed by the process. Claude Monet, the famous, wonderful genius, impressionist, suffered from cataracts near the end of his life, you may know. He struggled with that loss of vision, with the way it changed his painting. Ultimately, his right eye was operated on, and disappointed with the results, he refused operation on the left. Left him worse off than before. It was a source of great distress and sadness for him, but the poet Liesel Müller imagined a Monet who found deeper wisdom and meaning in the affliction. She wrote this: Monet refuses the operation. Doctor, you say there are no halos around the streetlights in Paris, and what I see is an aberration caused by old age and affliction. I tell you, it has taken me all my life to arrive at the vision of gas lamps as angels, to soften and blur and finally banish the edges that you regret I don't see. To learn that the line I called the horizon does not exist, and sky and water so long apart are the same state of being. 54 years before I could see Rouen Cathedral is built of parallel shafts of sun. And now you want to restore my youthful errors? Fixed notions of top and bottom, the illusion of three-dimensional space, wisteria separate from the bridge it covers? What can I say to convince you the Houses of Parliament dissolve night after night to become the fluid dream of the Thames? I will not return to a universe of objects that don't know each other, of islands, as if islands were not the lost children of one great continent. The world is flux, and light becomes what it touches. Becomes water, lilies on water, above and below water, becomes lilac and mauve and yellow and white and cerulean lamps, small fists passing sunlight so quickly to one another that it would take long streaming hair inside my brush to catch it, to paint the speed of light. Our weighted shapes, these verticals, burn to mix with air and change our bones, skin, clothes to gases. Doctor, if only you could see how heaven pulls earth into its arms, and how infinitely the heart expands to claim this world. Blue vapor without end. If you've ever struggled to claim your world, your blue vapor without end, ever struggled to claim yourself as an artist, a creator, I invite you into the blessing of permission. Wildness is part of the process. Say, I am one wild creature. Shout it out if you dare. I am one wild creature. You have all the permission you need to be creative, be wild, be weird. Wild creatures, creativity is your birthright. Go forth and photosynthesize. In all the things you are already making, rejoice. Delight in your creativity. And if you have felt barren, like the ground and trees of winter, let this season of rebirth, Let flowering buds, the blossoming tulips and daffodils, let fresh growing leaves, the pink cherry blossoms joined by bright new green, let the earth's hopeful regeneration be your call to create once more. May it be so. Amen.